Now that we've done all the adjustments to our model, it's time to export. So what we're going to do here is we're going to select everything in the scene. And first, I'll draw your attention to the inspector over here. And you see that I have a camera and lights collection, which I have disabled the ability to select. And then I have another collection which actually has all the pieces for this scene, all the objects for this scene in it. And so I'm going to hit Alt A to select all. You can see that selects everything in that column there. That's good. And then we're going to go to export. And what we're going to export as is GLTF, which is the format that we recommend you use for A-Frame and three.js, as well as any other web-based application. Now, yes, you can import FBX and object file formats as well as Collada if you wish, but those are transfer file formats. In other words, they're meant to be an exchange format between different 3D modeling applications. What we're using GLTF for is it's actually not a transfer format, it's a transmission format. In other words, it's designed to be transmitted across the web. And what I mean by that is downloaded or streamed. So it is designed and streamlined to be able to do that, so we have it download quicker than we would have with the other transfer formats. So we're going to use GLTF. And what we're going to notice right off the bat, if we click on the format here, is we have three flavors of GLTF. What we're going to use is we're going to use the binary one, which is a fairly common one to use. What the binary does is it creates a single file with a .glb extension at the end, and it holds the geometry, it holds animation, and it holds texture plus a few other things in the format, so it's just all in one file. If you're just starting out, this is probably the easiest thing to do. It basically alleviates any complexities that you might have when thinking about how to export your model. What I'll do is I'll create a separate video where I'll go over what the benefits are in using the other formats here. So we have GLTF separate, which creates a GLTF file plus a bin file plus a texture. And then of course there's GLTF embedded file, which creates just a GLTF file. And again, I'll go over that in a separate video. For now, we're going to use the binary format. And if we actually look in here, we're going to do selected objects and transfer it, leave that as it is. Data, we're going to look at the mesh. We're going to just do UVs and normals. In fact, you know what I'll do is I do have a preset for this, which is export static meshes. In fact, I have it for Synty export here, so we'll do that. There we go. So these will be all the settings that I normally use just to save some time. So we have UVs and normals in the mesh. That's good. In the material, I've set the JPEG quality to 75. 7580 is what I recommend, but do experiment because this is what's going to compress your texture file, and this does impact on your file size. So experiment with that until you see artifacting appear in your texture, which really you want to avoid. So that's material. We're not doing any shape keys. There's no armature, no skinning. There's no lights. And the compression, this one I leave as is. I haven't played with this one. We may not need it, but I've left it as is as for now until I experiment with it a little bit later on. And of course, animation is switched off. So now if I export that, there we go. We're all done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move into a glitch file, and we're going to import our newly exported GLB file or GLTF format file and see what other steps we may need to take with basically displaying our model correctly in A-Frame. So here we are on Glitch. I'm going to provide the link to this particular file so that you can have a go at this yourself and play around. So what I'm going to do first of all is we're going to go into Assets, and I'm going to drag and drop my control deck model into there. There it goes, it's uploaded, and there it is. Wonderful, with this texture and everything. So everything's come in correctly. I'm going to copy the URL and close that. Go back to my index file. And if we look here, we're using version 1.4.2 of A-Frame. I'm using the environment component just to give us something in the background to look at against our model. Excuse me again. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to load our asset. So I've given it an ID of 3D model underscore binary because that's the file format we used for our model. So I'm just going to paste in that link, that URL to that model. And then down here, I'm going to insert this into the scene. So GLTF model, I'll just close that. And then we're going to put the source equals hashtag 3D, well, there we go, 3D model underscore binary. And let's just do a refresh. Oops, sure enough, there it is. Okay, let's actually get that into position, and so we have a better view of it when we enter the scene. So I'm just going to refresh that. So let's do, first of all, let's just do position. So position equals, and I'm just going to push it into the background, so -2. And I'll do a rotation because it seems to be, we're looking at it from the front, which I want to look at as if we're sitting in the seats. So the rotation here is going to be 0, 180, and 0. So let's hit the refresh. Oh, there we go. There it is. So that's the file imported. But you'll notice something, I'm pretty sure right off the bat, it's very dark. We compare that to our file in the asset folder. That's what it should look like. And what it does look like is this. So we can fix that. And that's where the mesh shadows component will come in handy. Well, first of all, we don't have any shadows, so let's start taking care of stuff like that. So let's add the mesh shadows component in here. So this is script source equals, I'm just going to close that, finish it off. And it's right in the root, so all I have to do is mesh shadows.js, and that should be loaded. And then what we'll do is we'll attach it to our model. I'll attach it here. Mesh shadows. In fact, if we look inside of mesh shadows, we have the basics sitting in there already. So this is what we're adding here. Okay, so that's mesh shadows added. Of course, nothing's happening. So let's go back into mesh shadows. What I've got here is a simple event listener, and I'm listening for model loaded. We just have the one, it's listening for this model to be loaded, because that's where we've attached the event listener to L. All we're doing here is assigning values to some variables or constants inside of the event listener. And so one of the first things I want to do is just basically go through the mesh and find all of the nodes in there that are in fact meshes. So I'm going to go object traverse. Let's make sure I'm spelling this all correctly. And then I'm just going to go function node, and that, I believe I've got that correct. And hit return. And now what I'm going to do is just simply do a query if node is mesh, which means basically it comes back as true. Okay, so if node.isMesh is true, we're going to perform a few operations on it. So let's start by adding shadows. So node cast shadow equals true. And then if we hit refresh, and sure enough, there are our shadows. We may also want to do receive shadows. So let's do that as well. So node dot receive, receive shadow equals true. And we hit return. Now we're not going to see anything necessarily here because, well, we're getting some stripes. So this is, stripes are actually something to do with the receive shadows. And that's because we haven't told A-frame which what side of the mesh we want the shadow to be on. So let's actually correct for that as well. Let's go node. And what we're going to do is go into the material, and it's the shadow side, and we're going to go equals 1. Okay, and we hit refresh, and all the stripes are gone. That's good. Okay. So we still have a very dark model though. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the material again. So what we're going to do is we're just going to check to make sure that this model in fact has a texture map attached to it. So we're going to go node material map. So in other words, if this is true, if there is a map, there's something there, then we're going to actually change the way that it is encoded. So we're going to go node material map encoding equals 3, all capital, linear encoding. And that should lighten up our model. Oops, there we go. That looks right. Now let me show you what happens if I turn off the shadow side. I'm just going to comment it out. See that striping in there? That's if it's receiving a shadow. So we need to make sure that we tell A-frame or three.js which side of the mesh that we want the shadow cast on. So that's what that's all about. So there we go. We've got that in place. Take a better look at this guy. There we go. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to actually cover those 3 formats or 3 flavors of GLTF that you can use, and also get into how you can attach different textures on the fly if you like, or at the beginning allowing someone to choose what kind of texture their character has or the object that they have has.